Friends, how's everybody doing today? I hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. I am. I'm doing so wonderful compared to what I was doing last year this time. You see, last year this time, I was very, very ill, probably not too far away from death's door, with COVID. And this year, I'm so thankful for my health. I can't even tell you how happy I am today to have good health. So today, I thought maybe I would lift the mystery on some of the story of my health journey and do a tell-all. If you want to, you can ask questions in the comments below. So last year this time, I was so sick, and my sickness started around Thanksgiving. Around Thanksgiving, I was so excited because I had all my family come to a cabin in Ohio.
Throw it up over there. Throw it.
No, good.
Do you want to get in there? Oh, here.
Yeah, throw it.
Woo! Now just wait. You can get that fishy on you. You can get that fishy on it.
Whoa! Oh, you caught something! You caught something! Pull! Got a big fish!
And we celebrated Thanksgiving with all that we had. There was all kinds of good things to eat. There were all kinds of games. There were children's things to do. It was so much fun. The Friday after Thanksgiving, I felt like I had swallowed some water wrong. My throat felt a little thick and I felt like I had to keep clearing my throat. By the end of the day, I was bundled up in a blanket on the recliner at the cabin, and I was so cold. I couldn't get warm. They had a fire going. I had on layers of sweaters, and I was just so cold, and then my throat began to hurt even worse. Now, that cabin was well equipped. It had a hot tub. So I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run out to the hot tub. That'll help to warm me up. So I sat in the hot tub as long as I dared. And then I fumbled back through the cold darkness to the cabin. My family was amazing. They gave me all kinds of pills. There was pills and tinctures and vitamins galore. And they just kept saying, try this, take that. So I was taking all this stuff. After a while, I felt like a walking pill bottle. So I thought I felt just a little bit better on Saturday. And Saturday was our last day at the cabin. So I drove home with my two children. And we got home and I didn't feel good. I didn't feel very good. I was really tired by the time we got home, so I went to bed. I never got up from that point on. And it went from bad to worse. I woke up during the night with nausea. And after a while, I couldn't keep anything down. I just kept throwing up. By the end of Sunday evening, I had this metallic taste in my mouth and I began to get this terrible headache. This headache just went on and it was so severe that if I even had a small bret in my hair or if I even just bumped my head wrong a little bit, it would feel like my head was going to explode. It was the most intense headache that I ever had in my life. I still couldn't keep anything down except a few popsicles. And I just, after a while, began to retch and there was nothing to bring up. And I decided, you know what, I think maybe I have COVID. So Sunday night, I scheduled an appointment on Monday to go to the nearest pharmacy that did free COVID tests and just see if I had COVID or not. The metallic taste in my mouth, the lack of smell, it just sounded like COVID. So guess what? I did. I received a COVID test on Tuesday that said you are testing positive for COVID. So by this time, it was really desperate. And I was getting worse and worse. I could feel myself going downhill. It took a lot more effort for me to do small things. I was exhausted, I was dehydrated, and I heard of a doctor who gave little kits for people who had COVID, and I thought, man, if I could get a hold of a kit like that, that would be amazing. So one of my church friends went and picked up this little kit, and I was doing what it said. It made absolutely not a stitch of difference. So I did not have a good night on Tuesday night. I couldn't get my breath. I spent a lot of time in the shower, just over that hot water, just over that steam, trying to get my breath. But I was so exhausted when I would get done out of the shower that sometimes I would just lay on the bathroom floor for long periods of time until I felt well enough to crawl back into my bed. It was getting bad fast. So I woke up in the middle of the night with another long bout, and I decided something has to be done. So the next morning I set my alarm and I woke up plenty early, and as soon as the medical center in Chambersburg was open, I called them and I said, I hear that you're doing monoclonal treatments for COVID, and I have COVID pretty bad, and can you please do it because I'm getting desperate. And she said, oh, well, we had a cancellation this morning. Come right on in. So I went to get a shower to get ready to go, and it exhausted me so bad that I had to lay down for 20 minutes before I got enough energy to get dressed. After I had my clothes on, I had to put my shoes on. I had to rest for another 10 minutes so I could get my shoes on. I'm sure you can all see what is going on here. I climbed into my car and zombie-like, probably not safe at all, don't ever do this at home, drove down to that medical center. And I went through the drive-through and I told them I'm here for a COVID test. And they said, well, we have a place right over there, pull right over there, and a medical orderly will be right out to take care of you. So she said, we do it in your car. I said, okay. So I pulled over there and I was so exhausted. I had taken the forethought to bring along a pillow and a blanket. I just put my seat back and I just closed my eyes and I rested. All of a sudden, there was this knocking sound on my window, and here was the orderly, and he was right there, it's the medical guy. And he said, I'm here to do this monoclonal procedure. We want you to sign these papers. So I did. I signed the papers. He said, now we have to do some little bit of medical testing. He took my blood pressure, did different things. Then he pulled out one of these oxygen meters. Do you know what they are? This is an oxygen reader. And this is the one he pulled out of his pocket, and he stuck it on my finger like this. And then you push this little button here. And he said, now I want you to leave this on. Let's check your stats. Now, I didn't know anything about oxygen. I didn't know about anything about what these numbers are supposed to say or anything like that. So I was feeling this is just a normal thing. And he said to me, can you please sit up? So, okay, so I put my seat up. He said, take a lot of really deep breaths. So I did. Deep, 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 deep breaths. In and out. Now, he said, I'm going to put this back on your finger again. So he did. He did that maybe 4 times. And finally I was like, what is wrong with this guy? What's wrong? And I said to him, what's wrong? And he said, your oxygen is too low for us to do this procedure. Your oxygen should be at the number of 95 or above. If it's any lower than that, we won't do the procedure and you don't meet the criteria. And I said to him, what am I going to do? He said, you belong in the hospital. Did you know that? And I said, no, I didn't know that. I had no clue. I didn't know my oxygen was that low. He said, yeah, I think you might have COVID pneumonia. And I said, what? I was so shocked and overwhelmed by the information that I just about fainted right then and there on him. He quickly helped me. He's like, lay down, lay down. So I quick did. And he's like, are you all right? Are you all right? I said, yeah, I'm all right. I said, that was crazy. I said, I have been throwing everything up for the last several days. I don't have much reserve. So he said to me, well, if your oxygen doesn't get above 90 by the end of the day, you must promise me that you must go to the hospital. I'm serious, Glenda. This is nothing to fool with. And I said, okay. He said, do you have an oxygen meter? And I said, no. And he said, I'm going to give you this one. So he gave me this one. Still have it to this day. Then he said, I'm a Christian, and can I pray with you? And I said, oh yes, I would like that. So he took my hand, and that man right there in that parking lot prayed like crazy for me. And he said, now remember that, Glenda, that healing comes from God. You could be totally healed just by God touching you tonight when you go home. But you must promise me that if your oxygen doesn't rise above 90, you need to go to the hospital. He said, you're not in good shape. So then he said, I'm going to bring you something. So bless his heart, he went back into the pharmacy and came back out with a ginger, it was some kind of a ginger drink. And he said, it's supposed to settle your stomach. And he also gave me these little ginger drops to suck on. And he said, see if you can get some of this down. So I said, I'm going to lay here for a while till I get enough strength to go home. And he said, that's fine. So I laid there for 15 or 20 minutes. And after a while, there was another tap on my window. It was the orderly. He came back out and he said, just checking on you. Are you all right? I said, yeah, I'm fine. I feel better. I'll go home. So prior to this, several weeks before, I'd had a friend whose husband got COVID really bad. And she had him in the hospital, and he didn't do very well in the hospital. She was afraid she was going to lose him. When she heard about a clinic in Illinois that did amazing with COVID, I think they had like a 97% success rate with it. So she's one of my clients with Princess House. So she had been telling me all about this, and she had told me 1 week before I got COVID, Glenda, if you ever get COVID and you have low oxygen, and she had about 4 different things that she told me about, don't even go to the hospital. She said some of them are not very good at what they do. Some of them might be, but she said the one we went to wasn't. Just go to that clinic. And I said, well, where's this clinic at? She said, it's in Illinois. And she told me where it was. I said, oh, okay. I had no idea when she told me that I would ever need it. So I remembered that. So she had actually given me the number. I don't know why she did. She had given it to me. So I decided I'm going to call these people and just see what they say. So I called them, and you won't believe this, but those people were very busy with COVID patients. And the head manager there picked up the phone. And I told her, I said, I have COVID. And she asked me a bunch of questions. How long was I sick? What were my oxygen numbers? All that kind of thing. And she said to me, Glenda, you need oxygen. You are not going to make it unless you have an oxygen. And I said, oxygen? Where do I get that? And so she told me some places that maybe I could get some. So she said, how soon can you be out here? She said, we'll have a place for you here at our clinic if you can get out here. And I said, well, I'm going to have to find somebody to drive me because I can't drive. She said, find someone to drive you. And she said, we'll have a spot for you on Friday morning. This was Wednesday. Wait. It was actually Thursday morning. No, it was Wednesday. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting a little mixed here. It was Wednesday morning. So I got off the phone with her. I told her, I said, I'm coming. I don't know how I'll come, but I'll figure a way. And then I called my deacon's wife, Kendra. And I said, Kendra. And she said, Glenda, what is wrong with you? And I said, I don't feel very good. And so I proceeded to tell her what the pharmacist had told me, and also what the lady from the clinic had told me, that I needed oxygen. She said, where are you? I said, I'm down at this medical center in Chambersburg. And she said, I don't even think you should drive home. Why don't you wait until somebody comes and gets you? And I said to her, I want to go to bed. I can't wait. Don't do this at home. But I got behind the wheel of that car, and I mean to tell you, I didn't feel good. But I knew that there were angels beside me driving me home. I could feel them. So I got home, and I was exhausted. And I had to sit in the car for a while so I could have strength to walk into the living room. And I crawled up the stairs and I collapsed into my bed. And it was awful. I was so out of breath. I felt so terrible. And little did I know that Kendra was very much alarmed, and she had started a search already for oxygen for me. And my church ladies were very, very concerned, and they were like, who do we know that has an oxygen machine that Glenda could have? So my church ladies were very kind. They called a bunch of different people. They called some different clinics in the area. They were checking to see how much it costs to rent an oxygen machine. It's basically a machine that takes oxygen out of the air and you put tubes in your nose and helps you to breathe. Gives you higher oxygen concentrate. So, they were looking all over. It was very expensive to rent one. I think they were like $2,000 for a short period of time. When one of the ladies, as she was in the middle of doing her daily work, heard God tell her a name. And she hadn't talked to this lady for a long time, but the Lord just said, check with so-and-so. And she said, I had no idea why, but I called the lady and I said, do you have an oxygen machine? I need one for one of my friends at church. And the lady said, oh yes, here she had one in storage. Here, she had used one for a family member several years before that. So I didn't know this was all going on. I was just in bed trying very, very hard to keep breathing. So my children both had COVID as well, and they didn't go to school. So they were there bumbling around the house. I had no idea what they were all doing. I think they were very worried about me, but they didn't really know what to do. And so I was just laying in bed there, and all of a sudden I felt this hand on my side. And I knew somebody had arrived, and I just kind of opened my eyes, and here was my deacon's wife, and she had walked into my bedroom. It was so embarrassing. I had a pile of dirty wash there. I had my vaporizer hadn't worked, and so I had just taken an induction unit and a big pan of water, and I had that boiling. It was just all very makeshift. And she placed her hand on me, and in that moment, I knew that I had help. And she bustled around. She found some things that were very helpful in clearing my sinuses. And she said, now, just 1 teaspoon at a time, Glenda, you gotta get something into you. And she literally hand-fed me, teaspoon by teaspoon, some kind of liquid that was supposed to really revitalize you. Probably had electrolytes in it or something. So that's what happened. And she wasn't even there maybe an hour when my other friend from church showed up. And guess what? She had an oxygen machine with her. And they figured out how to use it, and they hooked it up. And right away, I could tell difference. I could tell that I was actually beginning to feel better. So they worked at packing my things, and my deacon's wife said that her and her husband would take me to Illinois that night. And my other friend said, you know what I'm going to do for you, Glenda? I'm going to see if I can find something to hook up to the vehicle so that you can have oxygen on the way out. And I said, oh, that'd be so great. So, and meanwhile, this head manager out at the clinic was in contact with us, and she was like, Glenda has to stay on that. And she can't get off of that oxygen concentrator. So, I slept, and they packed my clothes. They did some laundry. They packed the children's clothes. And by 7 o'clock that night, they drove me to Illinois. And at first, I thought this was going to be great. They had a big van with bucket seats in the middle, and I sat in one of those. 45 minutes into the ride, the battery for the concentrator no longer worked, and neither did anything else. So I didn't have any more oxygen. Somehow, however they connected it to the vehicle, it wasn't strong enough power or something to run that. So I was kind of out of options. So they said, what do you want to do, Glenda? And I said, well, I don't think I'll die quite that easily, but set me here and let the air condition come right down on my face so that I can have that. So that's what they did. They turned the air conditioner on, bless their hearts, and it just blew right down on my face, and it helped me to breathe. But we had this thing along, and every time they took my oxygen, it was another point lower. And from Pennsylvania to Illinois is about a 12-hour ride. And at some point during the ride, they just stopped taking it because it was too disheartening. I do remember at one point during the ride, they pulled over at a gas station and they stopped for an hour so that I could have a rest and use the oxygen concentrator. Half an hour before we got to our destination in Illinois, which ironically, I have a sister who lives in Illinois. Her name is Gladys, and she lived about 40 minutes away from this clinic. And when she found out I was sick, she said, oh my goodness, Glenda, come to my house and then I can take you to the clinic if you need help further from that. So we decided to go to her house. That was our destination. Half an hour or so before we were there, the vehicle in front of us hit a deer and it really messed up his car. There was debris all over the road and we hit that with our vehicle. There was some resounding thuds, and I remember my deacon saying, I hope we don't get a flat tire over this. We finally arrived at my sister's house, and I remember thinking they pulled up right up to the walk, and I remember thinking all I have to do is get up those stairs and into the house because there was a sofa there. But I almost didn't make it. When I reached the sofa, I collapsed. And they bustled that oxygen concentrator right in and hooked me up right away on full power. But it wasn't enough to keep my oxygen above 90. So my sister called the clinic again and said, I think this oxygen concentrator is kind of old. I don't know if it's working at full power. And I think my sister needs something more than that. So they said, oh, well, we have them for rent here. Come get one. So another one of my friends bustled 40 minutes down and back from the clinic with a stronger oxygen concentrator. And it had a mask on it. And the mask helped me so much. I felt a lot better after I had that. We had it cranked all the way up to the top. I had all the oxygen there was to be gotten. So I slept in a recliner. The doctor wouldn't let me lay down. He said laying down is not good for COVID patients. And I slept in that recliner for weeks. But I was upright, had my oxygen on. They bundled me all up in pillows and stuff. And I still had this raging headache. I could not handle it. Anything that touched my head just hurt like crazy. So I could hardly even comb it. It hurt that bad. I have never had a headache like it since, and I hope I never do again. It was horrible. And I still couldn't taste anything. Everything, there was this overwhelming metallic taste. I was still nauseated, so I still would throw up every so often, even though there was nothing in there to throw up. That night was a long night, and my sister came to check on me several times. The one time during the night, I had taken my mask off without even knowing it. And when she found me, my oxygen was below 80. And so they quickly hooked me back up. They said, Glenda, why did you take it off? And I said, oh, I don't know. And I wasn't with it. And they laugh about it today. They say that I said weird things, that I tried to do things that weren't even possible, and that I wasn't with it, which I believe. Showers were the very worst thing. Oh, if I took a shower, my oxygen would often drop to 75 or something like that. And it took a long time to recover from a shower. I do not know why showers were so debilitating, but they were the worst thing that I could do. It was awful. My sister finally insisted that I tried to take a shower wearing my oxygen mask, and I'm telling you, there's nothing like that. I couldn't even get dressed by myself. They had to help me get dressed and undressed, and it's a very humiliating place to be in, let me tell you, when you can't even hardly do that for yourself. The next morning was Friday morning, and they got me up and tried to get me something to eat, but I didn't want anything. And we went down to the clinic, and I was so relieved to finally arrive. However, there were lots of other people there who had just arrived as well, and they were swamped. I sat in a chair, a reclining chair, from 8:30 in the morning until 12:30 in the afternoon before they even came and looked at me. I was so glad for that oxygen concentrator. So after a while, the doctor bustled in and he apologized profusely. He said, "We are just overwhelmed with COVID patients." And he said, let me see if we can get an IV going. Well, I had had several people come and try, but my veins are hard to get into for number one. And number two, I was very dehydrated. They tried and tried and tried, and they couldn't get it. So finally, the doctor took a needle that you use on little babies, and he finally got a vein after, I don't know, I don't know how many tries it was because I was too sick to count, but it might have been 7 tries or 10 tries or something. They finally, using this little tiny needle, got in. But because it was such a tiny needle, it took forever until that IV bag was finished. And they gave me this IV that was full of all kinds of vitamins and minerals. The doctor said that COVID strips you of all these vital things that your body needs to stay healthy. And if you can give your body a blast of that, along with meds, it can really kickstart your immune system. I was on blood thinner. My blood was too thick. I was on countless medicines. It was a whole handful of actual medical meds from a medical doctor, because he is a medical doctor. But he also paired this other infusion IV with it. And after my very first treatment, around 4 o'clock that afternoon, I started to feel better. I could tell difference from that first treatment. They drew blood, they did all kinds of things, and I went home with all kinds of meds plus a nebulizer. And I had to do nebulizing treatments at least 3 times a day, which was actually kind of hard to fit in because I was going to the clinic all the time. From that day on, I went to the clinic during the day and went home to my sister's during the night to sleep. My sister said that she felt the very large burden on her shoulders of trying to keep Glenda Joseph alive. And she was so worried that I was going to die on her watch. But I didn't. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that the goodness of God is so much greater than we give him credit for. And during some of those days when I didn't know if I was going to make it or not, I was praying to God one day. I couldn't do much, but I could pray. And he came to me. It was such a treasured moment. He came to me and he said that I was going to walk through the fire and I was going to walk through the water. But the fire would not burn me and the water would not overtake me. And from that moment on, I knew that I was going to live and not die. But I don't know how strong I was to actually convey that to my family members because they were all very worried. My brothers from Vermont sent me flowers. And they called every day to see how I was doing. So that felt good to know that they were worried. My other sister also checked in. She had just had COVID as well. several months before that, so she knew a little bit what it felt like, but she did not have it as bad as I did. The doctor says that COVID settles into your weakest part of your body. And I do have a weak spot, and it's my lungs. I had pneumonia several years before that, and it was a bad and ugly bout of pneumonia. I was down for 8 weeks. And so I had a relapse, and I didn't feel like I got the best care. I switched doctors. Anyways, and so because I had that weakness, the doctor thinks that's why it settled so fast into my lungs there. So I would go to the clinic first thing in the morning usually, and we might not get back until anywhere's between from 3 to 5 o'clock. And my sister's church was so amazing. They provided meals for us because they realized how hard it was. I took my children with me. Both of them had COVID anyways. They had a very mild version of it, but I couldn't very well send them to school with COVID. So they were there with me, and boy, was I ever glad. They came and they put puzzles together with me. Says that COVID is no longer contagious after a certain period of time, and I had long since passed that. So they were in and out of my room all the time. Gladys's little children were always there for me. They used to come and sing me songs, and little Carter, he just loves his Aunt Nena. He calls me Aunt Nena. He would climb up onto my lap and fall asleep, and we'd take naps together. So they nursed me back to health. They brought me popsicles. My church was so amazing. They sent me this huge gift bag full of gifts. And every day we'd open one gift. Sometimes it was a gift for the children. Sometimes it was a puzzle. Sometimes it was just all kinds of things. We worked for a long time on a puzzle. And I would do 1 or 2 or 3 pieces, and then I would be exhausted. I'd sit back for a while. Then I'd get up and try again. I went to the clinic for 2 whole weeks. Towards the end of that, my oxygen began to rise, and I was beginning to get better. However, I still wasn't quite what I should have been. The doctor offered that I could have stayed for another week, or I could have went home. My children had been out of school for 2 weeks. I thought it was time for them to go home. So we still had 1 more week of school yet before Christmas. So I decided to go home. I decided to be a burden to my church people instead of my sister. My sister wasn't so sure about that. She was very, very worried. So my brother-in-law took me and my children, I think, to Ohio. And then we met one of my church friends in Ohio, and they brought me the rest of the way home. That's what happened there. It was scary. My oxygen continued to fluctuate. By the time I went home, I no longer needed to be on the oxygen concentrator. However, I still dipped pretty low sometimes. It was nothing to put on the oxygen meter and see 85 or something like that. But then if I really worked at breathing, it would usually climb to 90 or so. So I was still too sick to do much. So that week, my children went back to school, and my church family came. I think one lady came every day and either sat with me or did laundry, or they provided meals. And I just sat in my recliner and tried to get better. It wasn't very much fun. When my brothers in Vermont heard that I was back home again, they said, Glenda, what are you going to do for Christmas? And I said, I don't know. And they said, you know what? We're bringing you here to Vermont for Christmas so we can take care of you, because we had a pretty long Christmas vacation. So after that 1 week of school, we had another Christmas vacation, and one of my brothers, Eldon, took me from Pennsylvania to Vermont, which is about 9 to 10 hours drive, depending how fast you drive. I, of course, had to stop to eat protein. My doctor kept insisting that I eat protein every time I take pills. He also had me on some pills for my liver. He said that if you have COVID really bad, it can damage a lot of things, but it can really do harm to your liver. So I had to take these pills, and so we stopped for lunch at a little place called Log Jam Restaurant in Fort Anne, New York. It's a really good restaurant. If you're ever driving to Vermont and you need a stop along the way, Google the Log Jam Restaurant in Fort Anne. It's amazing. So I spent Christmas vacation at my brother's house. I thought I was getting better. However, on the second day that I was there, I started getting a very bad cold again. And I went downhill, and I ran fevers, and I was sick, and I didn't do anything the whole time I was there. I just rested and tried to get better and tried not to freak out. They took really, really, really good care of me. Made sure I got my pills on time. And we kept going on. I had been taking all those pills at the right times had looked overwhelming to me. So my church family kind of stepped in, and one of them helped me. We had 3 bags, and we proportioned the pills out so that 3 times a day I would take a bag, and each Ziploc bag had like Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and Monday evening. So I would just know if I had taken my pills or not, because I couldn't remember. Another thing that was really debilitating to me during that time of lack of oxygen was doing things. And I remember once I wanted to be of assistance. So one of my siblings was making a meal, and I said, well, you're making a salad. Let me cut the salad lettuce for you. She wanted it shredded. So I had a cutting board and had a knife. And in my mind, I knew what I was doing. I knew what my hand was supposed to do. I was trying to cut this lettuce. I could not make that knife do what I wanted it to do. I ended up with 2 cuts on my fingers because of that. My knife did whatever I could. There was no coordination there. So I ended up cutting my fingers instead of the lettuce. So I had to stop that. So there was a lot of weird things that was happening. I couldn't remember very well. Coordination was terrible. My children insist that one time I tried to sit down on a stool that wasn't there, and that some of the things that I say didn't make much sense. I don't remember that, but they do very vividly. So after Christmas vacation and spending that pretty much in a chair, I spent most of January in my recliner and most of February. And I would slowly get better, but after a while I couldn't handle anymore. And I messaged my doctor back out in Illinois, and I said, I need help. And he said, okay, Glenda, I am going to ship you UPS some more IVs. Just find somebody around you to see if they would administer them. And I did. I have a wonderful midwife in this area. She delivers a lot of Mennonite and Amish babies in this area. And she agreed. Did you know how hard it is to find something like that? She agreed to do that. She said the reason why most RNs would not agree to do something like that is if something adverse would happen. And then that would be against their license. But she has done all kinds of vitamin IVs before, and so she kind of knew what to expect. So the first time I did that, I think it was the end of January, and it was like a major detox, and I was not expecting it, and I was back off my feet for real for several days. I didn't feel good for several days after that. Then I did it again about a week or so later, and that time I felt better. I felt much better. And after that second IV, I began to slowly get better. I had in my work of my business, I'm a leader of an amazing Princess House team. They're some of the best women out there. I love them so much. And so I always do a Christmas banquet for them. We give away lots of gifts and all kinds of stuff. Well, I wanted to do this for them, and I had to push it off because I had COVID. But they all said, "Oh, Glenda, we'll help you do it." So I had the brainchild for the idea, and they put it together. The Lord brought me a caterer to do the food, and it was amazing. It just fell together. I came back to my feet in a rush in order to do that at the very end of February. The Lord was really good to me, and the year before in my business, He had granted me a free trip to Cancun, Mexico. And He had also granted it to me that my friend, my leader, my mentor, Charity Lab, would go along with me to Cancun. So in March, we went to Cancun together, and it was so wonderful. I sat by that seaside, I buried my feet in the sand, and I felt so good by that ocean air. I cannot tell you how those 5 days in Cancun by that beautiful turquoise water revived my heart and my spirits. God was at work in our lives, and it showed very plainly. My children were so happy that I was able to go. I don't think there was a thread of jealousy. They were like, "Mom, go. We want you to get better." So they stayed with friends who gladly took care of them, and my friend Charity and I spent a luxurious week in Cancun. Little by little, I began to make my way back to health. I'm still not there. So I had a bad cold the other week, and I went to the doctor, and they put one of these on me. My oxygen was just all over the place in that minute. Sometimes it was 94, 93, sometimes it was 96. And the doctor said, "I'm sending you for x-rays to see if your lungs are okay." So I did. I went for the x-rays, and everything looks okay. The doctor explained to me that sometimes COVID can create a rubbery substance on the outside of your lungs, and it prevents oxygen from being transferred into your body the way it should be. And so it takes a long, long time to get rid of that rubbery substance. Today, I don't know why God saw fit to spare my life, but I do know this, that He's a great, great Father, and He has all things planned for good. And there must have been a reason for my COVID illness. And I'm so grateful for life today. And I'm so grateful that the Lord gave me the resources just at the right time to protect me from the severity of this disease. I'm sure He had a plan and a purpose. I'm also thankful today that my symptoms are slowly going away one by one. Last night, I was with some of my friends, and we celebrated life. And I especially celebrated the gift of life, knowing that the year before I was pretty close to death. Now here's the truth. None of us know exactly how close we are to death. We might be a step away from it this second and not know it. But when you're really sick and you come back from that, it gives you a fresh perspective. And when you turn 40 and you almost didn't make it to 40, it causes you to do some strange things. For example, I'm now going to school to get my GED. I didn't go to 12th grade. Well, guess what? I'm finishing my schooling 4 days a week. I'm working at it. There's some other things that I have changed as well in my life. Working at decluttering. It just opened my eyes to see that there's some things that maybe I should get rid of, some things I should bring in, and some things that I need to up my game in. God is so good. Let's always, always thank Him for the gift of life. Thank you for listening to my story. And please share this story with others who may have had the COVID disaster. I'd love to hear from you. There's one more thing I want to say before I quit. At that clinic, I sat beside people who were vaccinated for COVID. I sat beside people who were not vaccinated. I sat beside people who were very healthy, who had been very healthy otherwise, no problems, but who just couldn't get better. I sat beside buff dudes and middle-aged housewives. I sat beside young people, not many children. I sat beside old people. And many of our symptoms were the same. And we would swap stories while we got those IVs. It was a good experience, one in which I saw the hand of God. I had one of my friends die when I was there. He came to the clinic just about the time that I was getting ready to leave. He didn't make it. I actually lent him my oxygen machine for a short period of time when he arrived at the clinic because he was in such a bad way and he needed it. And I was getting better. I think about that man often throughout the past year. Think about his family and the sorrows that they've endured. Think about the many friends I have lost to COVID. God is so bigger than we are, and He knows our path. And why He saves some and why He takes others, we'll never know. I just know this: my time here isn't done yet. So I'm really excited to see what He brings. Love to you all. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and recommend me to others. I've got a lot more coming.